senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research with your website Urbanophile. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's right.
The lover of cities. Tell me, when did your love of cities start? Were you a child? When did you decide that you really wanted to study, research, and kind of just delve into urban affairs?
Well, I grew up 4 miles outside of a town of 29 people in rural southern Indiana. And when my family first moved there when I was a kid, we lived in a trailer on a gravel road. So it's been said, I love cities like only someone from a town of 29 people can.
So you had an approach to cities. And now, how long had you lived in Rhode Island for when you were here, Aaron?
I was there about 18 months, probably or so. So I got to see a little bit of New England, and I've been back since. And I think I'm going to come up again in April because I just want to, get back up there and eat some food and just see some people. It's good.
Well, we always appreciated, both when you were here and when you moved down to Manhattan, picking your brain on all things urban economics, policy, trends. Follow your Urbanophile website closely as to what you're focusing on and also how it pertains here to Providence. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was a recent column on cities and immigration in the age of Trump. And you gave a talk on that, correct?
Yes, I was part of a panel at New York University doing an event talking about immigration. What does Trump mean for immigration, particularly from an urban policy perspective?
And talk with us about Providence. There's been a lot of talk about sanctuary cities, talk about funding. So you've looked at it from a national perspective. How does Providence move forward with immigration in the age of Trump?
Well, what I've said is that cities really don't make immigration policy. Immigration policy is basically a federal policy. For example, a few years ago, Arizona tried to put some restrictions on people who are here illegally, what they could and couldn't do in the state. Those were declared unconstitutional because the government said, hey, only the federal government can really do things from an immigration perspective. So they don't really have much power, to be honest. The sanctuary city thing, is sort of it's just a sort of a nebulous term in a sense. There are many, many varieties of it. But at some level, it's just saying we won't actually help the federal government enforce immigration laws. But other than that, from a policy perspective, it's not there. I do understand why cities like Providence, why states like Rhode Island will want to attract immigrants. The population has been pretty stagnant. Mm-hmm. Rhode Island was even declining in population for a while. It has one of the oldest populations in the country in terms of people over 85. So you want to attract people in who could come in. Immigrants can come in. And then the idea that, historically a lot of the state's industries were powered by immigrants from, Portugal, from Italy, from Ireland, places like that. And so I think there's this idea that immigration is kind of a dynamic force that would help with the economy.
And what do you have to say? Folks here some have expressed concerns that under Trump administration, by lieu of, as you said, policy being handled at the federal level, but with the policy comes the power of the purse strings. There is concern here about potential for cuts in federal funding. Again, talk to the Providence example, and what do you see around the country?
Yeah, it's really unclear exactly what's going to happen there. I don't want to comment too much on it because I think some of it comes down to some of the constitutionality of being able to do that, which I just don't really have the legal expertise in. Certainly, cities are very dependent on federal and state aid for a lot of things. And even if the federal government couldn't retrospectively kind of yank funds that you have, certainly they have a lot of control over future funding and future things that you might do. And so I would definitely say there's financial exposure, potentially. The president has a lot of power in our system. And, Obama used it. And a lot of people liked Obama using it in these urban areas. Well, now Trump uses it. So that's what I always say. The argument for limited government is you have to assume the guy you don't like has control. But I would say, Providence, the city of Providence has huge financial issues, as you know. Many of the cities and towns of Rhode Island do. I wouldn't put this at the top of the list in terms of the things that they're facing, but certainly anything that adds to their financial woe is not good.
One of the things you just brought up, financial issues, Aaron, as you may have been following here, obviously the topic of bankruptcy has always been on the table in recent years. Alan Hassenfeld has publicly called for the city to go into bankruptcy. What's your thought on that? Again, it's something that's been tossed around for a while. Here we are in 2017, again, looking at Providence and what you've seen around the country. Is this something that should be on the table or not?
Well, I mean, in a sense, it's you have to be able to not you have to essentially be insolvent and not be able to pay your bills in order for cities to go into bankruptcy. It's not really that easy to file bankruptcy. So people who've tried to file it, there's a lot of requirements around what municipalities have to do to file bankruptcy. Certainly, when I was, when I was living here, that's when Angel Taveras, I think did a Herculean job of bringing a lot of people to the table in terms of the unions, in terms of some of the universities and the major institutional people to essentially forestall imminent financial collapse. But I don't know that that really solved, in a sense, that doesn't solve the problem. So you have a number of towns that have these huge liabilities. Some of them may actually end up going bankrupt. We'll have to see. I can't see the bailout's going to be in order. Central Falls certainly already did, and so that's a potential template for the future.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the nonprofits. This is something that's brought up time and time again. And again, we're always so insularly focused here on Rhode Island and the town-gown relations here in Providence. Do you see the city being able to go back to the nonprofits and extract more concessions? And is this something we see around the country? Is it unique to Providence or not?
Well, certainly in a number of places where the economy has effectively, but a lot of the private sector, major corporate employers have gone away. Public and quasi-public sector businesses have acquired a higher economic footprint in the city. Mm-hmm. Universities, hospitals, et cetera. And so there's definitely been a lot of talk elsewhere. I think Connecticut has talked about revoking the tax exempt status of the Yale endowment, for example, because it's really, a lot of these places, they're seen as having money, and they're seen as not being able to move very easily. And so I think it's one that people are definitely going to look at.
Interesting you mentioned the going after the tax exempt status of Yale's endowment. Where are they in that proposal?
Yeah, I don't know. I read something about that. I don't know the details of it. I think it's probably, there's this idea that, New Haven, a lot of these towns in Connecticut are not in great shape. Either Connecticut's budget's not in great shape. So, again, people are looking at, you got this multi-billion dollar endowment, this very, very wealthy institution. It's like they're looking for money where the money exists. They can't really, Connecticut's got a problem. They raise corporate taxes, and GE left for Boston. A number of businesses have left the state. They really can't, they really don't have a lot of leverage to extract taxes out of the corporate sector anymore. So where are they going to go?
Well, the discussion here always is on that, the potential or the ability to go back to the nonprofit. So we shall see. It's something that's always, been in the realm of discussion here. One of the things that you wrote about recently that I wanted to talk with you about, driverless cars and the future of infrastructure. Now, this is something as Rhode Island is constantly wrestling with how to improve infrastructure. Obviously, the truck toll debate, looking to improve the 610 connector here. But, talk with what your research has showed. Are we tinkering with something that 10, 5, 15 years is going to be completely different than what we know today? Well, how does that look?
Right. We don't know about the future of driverless cars, but you see that Uber is testing them on the roads in Pittsburgh right now. Yeah, a semi-trailer vehicle just delivered 50,000 cases of beer for Coors in Colorado. Google's been testing cars on the road. So there's been a major push into this. Technology. Go back
to the beer delivery. What happened?
Well, they basically took a semi and it was a Coors semi and equipped it with driverless automation, and it made a driverless delivery. Long distance delivery. It wasn't to a store, but it was a long distance delivery.
Wow.
Benz is also testing driverless trucks. It's a big deal. So if this technology, ends up actually, working, which most people seem to think that it ultimately will, it could be profoundly transformational, for our economy in terms of may increase demand for trips as people who may be too elderly to drive or too young to drive, for example, or maybe people with disabilities now have access to vehicles they didn't have access to before. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it can make things more efficient in terms of fewer accidents. So this is pervasive. It would be a gigantic technological change. And so what you don't want to be doing is investing in a lot of legacy infrastructure when we're on the verge of a major revolution in technology with driverless cars. And what I would say with the 610 connector is that's an existing piece of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So I'm not arguing that we shouldn't fix what we have. Rhode Island's got so many bridges and things that are in bad shape. Those have to be repaired. But you shouldn't build a lot of new and widened highways, until we see some of this stuff shake out. But to its credit, Rhode Island's really not doing that.
So how does that look? And if we're talking again about driverless cars, are there going to be fewer cars on the road because of this? I mean, are we talking about the same volume? I mean, how does that look from a pragmatic perspective?
I've tried reading a lot of the studies that are out there, and the thing is, we just don't know. I think it's just one of the things we just don't know. And what that means is that the future is more uncertain than it used to be. And so that affects our investments. Yep. We have to kind of discount the future at a higher rate in an era of greater uncertainty. We shouldn't make investments with low return on investment, thinking that we're just gonna make our projections when those projections could be very, very, very off. So that's what I'm saying. It really just increases uncertainty. It doesn't necessarily, we don't know, and the odds are it's going to be pretty big.
And how soon do we see this? As you said, they're testing them. Of course, we've seen examples of accidents that happen with them. Is there any chilling effect when stuff like that happens, when there's accidents that occur with the test cars?
Yes. Here's one thing I would say. I'm not on the engineering. When I talk to people who are associated with this, they're thinking within 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
This will happen. And I go to a lot of conferences and I hear a lot of people talk, and basically everybody seems to be lining up to more or less say, you must switch to a driverless car. They want to basically ban private driving as soon as possible. Every urbanist conference is full of discussions like that. And the rationale is going to be safety. There are tens of thousands of people who are killed in traffic accidents every year, most of which are due to driver error. And so to the extent that you could eliminate driver error effectively through better automation, that's going to be basically the lever people are going to push. There's going to be a huge push to mandate it, particularly since they probably won't operate that well in a mixed mode of some people are driving, some people are in a driverless. And so the real question is, driverless car basically just a new model of car, or is it something fundamentally different, like the shift from horse and buggy to automobiles? When that first came along, we didn't really understand what that was going to do to our society, how it was going to transform our society. But what we did see is that very quickly, as cars, there's some initial pushback. Mm-hmm. Then we started saying things like, "Hey, pedestrians, you can't just go around in the street anymore. Hey, horses, you can't just." So we sort of rearranged the laws to favor these cars. And so I could easily see something very similar happening with these driverless cars. There's kind of an initial tumultuous, controversial transition period, and then effectively the laws are changed to basically force everyone into a situation that optimizes for the driverless car, just like we did with regular cars.
And you see that the government having to take a heavy hand in this, of having to legislate basically this industry.
Well, the government obviously has a regulatory function over the industry, and it's going to be very important to understand. But I think there is going to be a lot of push to regulate, the government to regulate.
Well, again, these are two recent articles that I'd seen that you had written that were of interest, because you write these fascinating pieces on the national level. And of course, I'd love to get you to pick your brain as to how it could impact Providence. Again, you lived here for a little bit. I'm hoping you're keeping tabs on what's going on here. Obviously, we're involved in a great experiment here with Go Local Live and our Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. We had a real estate professional in yesterday. We had Bill Fisher with the Superman Building talking about development downtown. What do you see as you're looking at Providence, again, from a little bit of that 10,000 foot perspective, because you're down in Manhattan now? Has Providence turned the corner, or is the specter of the financial issues something that still looms large?
I don't know enough about what's going on specifically in the city of Providence to comment, but I would say, just in terms of general trends, there have been in many cities a increase of population in kind of the downtown areas or the kind of the near downtown areas.
Mm-hmm.
This is happening even in places like Cleveland, like St. Louis, places that have been in decline for a very long time. Thousands of new people are now moving downtown. A lot of cities have apartment construction going crazy. And so Providence has a great historic neighborhoods, great historic downtowns of the type people like. It's an expensive city, but it's also in a very high cost region. It's certainly a much more cost effective place to live than Boston or New York City or Washington, D.C. So I think that the trends basically would suggest that there is demand for living in a place like Providence. When I was there, it was very challenging to build. They couldn't really get the economics of building right, and there wasn't the kind of apartment boom going on in Providence that had gone on elsewhere. I'm not sure if anything has changed on that front, but downtown was basically sold out in terms of residential not that long ago. So I think that the general trend would suggest there's demand to live in places like Providence. So you should feel good about that.
And we are seeing it, and literally from the studio here, and I always want to turn the camera around to show folks, at the corner of Dorrance in Way Bossett above a Dunkin' Donuts. I think they're putting 40 new units of apartments in there. I can see the construction daily. So yes, we are seeing a lot more on the residential side. And so I hope when you're up here in April that you come into the studio to talk with us in studio about urban issues. We have, speaking of urban issues, I just saw, because we've got huge windows here, I saw Central Falls Mayor James Diosa walk in, and we're going to talk about what's going on in Central Falls. But Renn, again, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Urban Policy, appreciate your checking in. And if folks want to check out more with what Aaron writes about urban issues, please check in his site, Urbanophile, and we'll have you back soon. So